Welcome everyone to part 3 of Close the Gap, the graduate application process for undocumented students. It seems like some of you might not have been here for the first two parts, but it's totally fine. I recorded those. I will be sharing that with you hopefully next week. But today we will be focusing on the following. So yesterday actually, during the second session, I gave a general overview of what are the different parts of the graduate application. But today we will go into depth about what each one requires, right? Just so you have a more clear idea. In addition to that, we will look at what the cost is and what funding opportunities are out there so you are able to fund grad school, right? It's expensive. And then finally, just a short slide or two on showing you how to create a budget for that and just plan ahead so you don't have a ton of financial pressures once you get to grad school. So I'd like to introduce myself as well for those who might not know me. My name is Stephanie Revelo Escobar. I am the current USS graduate student mentor. I help out both undergrads who are interested in going to grad school and also current undocumented graduate students, just to form a sense of community, right? And I myself am a grad student. I'm doing my master's in computational media. So if any of you are interested in like STEM or anything related, feel free to ask me both about my career or just grad school. So on to part 1, the application requirements. So the grad application is a bit longer than undergrad application, and it works a little differently. I mentioned this yesterday as well. The application season starts in the fall quarter of your senior year if you're planning to apply your last year. If not, just think of it of like the fall being when the application should be submitted. So most deadlines range anywhere between the first week of December to like the first week of January. Some even go up until February. So you would turn stuff in a bit later than what undergrad students would. And they might open as early as the summertime. So think of your timeline to submit that deadline as anywhere between like July to December, January, right? Those are the months you have to finish the application and submit everything. But keep in mind that you should actually submit this ahead of time. Don't leave it until January and December, because it's in most cases, there's a lot of first come, first serve type of thing with grad school applications. Whoever they review first might have priority or whatever, or they might get in contact with you first. And also, I'll mention a couple more things, but also there's like fees for the grad application. So you want to make sure you apply early so you can probably get like a fee waiver of some kind, but we'll touch more on that later. But yeah, that's the general deadline and like time frame for the application, the grad application. So keep that in mind. It's a bit different than the undergrad application. These are the 6 general categories. We covered this yesterday, just a short overview. We have the regular online form, which has your basic information, such as your name, address, etc. Then you have the official transcript you need to send in with your current grades. Keep in mind, if you're applying while you're still a senior, you would send an official transcript of whatever grades you have up to that moment, right? They understand that if you're a senior and you're applying in like January, December, you haven't finished your last couple quarters or semesters, right? And that's totally fine. And if you have graduated and took a couple gap years, you would request a full official transcript from your school, which has everything you took while you were in school. And then you would also send in test scores such as the GREs, MCATs for med school, LSAT for law school, etc. Just like when an undergrad you had to submit like an SAT, ACT, that type of thing. Additionally, we have 2 written parts: the personal statement, which is more about speaking about yourself as a person; the statement of purpose, which is talking more about your research interests and what you want to study when you go into grad school. Then we have 2 to 3 letters of rec, usually should be from like professors or advisors. And we also have the resume portion or CV, depending on what they ask for. This is just a summary of your education and any achievements you've had. This is just a general overview, and in this next part, we're going to go into depth about like what each part requires. So like I was mentioning earlier, these applications have fees. So you want to submit as early as you can, because applications can be anywhere around $100, maybe even more, maybe a little less. That's a lot of money if you're applying to more than one, right? So it's always great to apply early because oftentimes schools offer a few waivers, but it's on a first come, first served basis, right? So if you apply close to the deadline, maybe everyone else that applied before you used up all the few waivers, so you have to pay that much. And it adds up. If you apply to 5 schools and they all cost $100, that's $500, right? Whether you get in or not, you're not going to get that money back. In addition to that, the tests that you might need to take have fees. I think like SATs and ACTs also had fees, like when you were in high school if you took them. But when it comes to grad exams, they can be anywhere between 200 or more, depending. So just prepare for that. If you can save up money, cool. If you can find any campus resources that can help you with that funding, that'd be great as well. Or like apply to scholarships in preparation for that, so you have that little fund there, right? But I will say a lot of grad departments aren't requiring these exams anymore. After COVID, things kind of changed. I actually didn't have to complete any of these exams to get into Santa Cruz. So it might be the case that you don't need to take these exams, but it varies by department, by campus. So just look into those details whenever you're going to apply as well. And another thing was a portfolio. So some schools might require a portfolio as part of your application as well. And it usually depends on what major you're in. If you're in art, that makes sense. You might need to like provide some canvas pictures of like some canvas art that you've done, maybe some photography, or if you're like in film, some examples of films that you've done. If you're in more of a tech field, also, they sometimes ask you to provide an example, like a website with all the work you've done, all the projects you've done. If you're like a programmer, a GitHub repo with all your code and stuff. So keep in mind, you might also have to prepare that additionally. And you might not be familiar with that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now let's go into the different parts of the application. So the application form is just an online general application. This form usually opens as early as summer, before you're even in your last year of undergrad. So you might have to like just keep an eye out and try to look at that as early as possible. You would have to have separate login information for each online form. So keep in mind, like in undergrad, if you were applying to the UCs, you usually just did one UC application and that went to all the UCs that you were considering, right? So that's not the case in grad school. In grad school, it's by department. So for example, like you might want to apply to the film and digital media department on campus, right? And that is completely different than applying to, for example, the math department, right? It's not like as a school basis, it's a departmental basis, right? So you're gonna have logins for whatever departments and campuses you're applying to, and you gotta be able to keep track of all of that. A lot of logins you can kind of forget. And another point that I wanted to make was, if you're interested in more than one department in a specific campus, for example, when I was applying to Santa Cruz, I was interested in both the applied math department because my bachelor's was applied math, and also computational media because I also had an emphasis in computer science. So I kind of wanted to do coding as well. So I was considering the two, but they didn't allow me to apply to both. They actually made me pick. So many campuses actually do not let you apply to more than one department. So you have to decide. And I did spend a couple of weeks going back and forth talking to both departments before I made up my mind. So yeah, that's also another thing to consider. But yeah, in addition to the application form, you have to send official transcripts. Some campuses might allow you to just send the non-official transcript that you can just look up on the portal. But in many cases, they will require an official transcript that you have to request directly from the registrar. Keep in mind, this might also require more time because they need to process your order and send that out. So it's important to start early. And it also might have a cost. So UCSC has a link through the Office of Registrar where you have to request these official transcripts. I don't know if I linked it here. If anything, I will put, okay, I have it in my notes. That's the website usually used to order transcripts here, official transcripts. And depending how fast you want them, the price varies. So if you want like to send it physically through mail, it could take anywhere between 5 to 10 business days, and that costs $20. If you want to rush it, say you left the application to the last moment, and you want to send it through mail, it can get there in 1 to 2 business days, but that will cost $43. So again, start early. And then also there's another option where some departments might want you to not send a paper copy. They want an electronic version, like a PDF. Those can send as fast as 5 to 10 minutes. So that's another option as well. And that costs $27. So yeah, prices vary and timelines vary. So make sure you look into this ahead of time. Okay, and now the test scores. So these, okay, let's see. I mentioned more in terms of like if you're in school, but again, like I'm saying, anything that I mentioned, if you're taking a gap year and you're going to do this later, it's that timeline fits fine. But thinking of fall, like if you are a student and applying, it can get busy. So it's really important to start taking these exams way ahead of time, right? So you can get your scores back and make sure you take the time to like study and all of that. Some exams have dates for you to take tests like year round. So it's super easy to get those exams done ahead of time, but it depends. Some of them are limited and only have like 2 to 3 dates in the year for you to take them. So it's really important for you to plan ahead in those cases. And I think those are very limited, include like the MCAT, the medical school exam and stuff like that. So just do your research on what type of exams you might need to take and what days they're available in the year. And just to think of like how fast you might get your results, here are a couple of timelines depending on what exam you take. So the GRE, that's like the general exam for grad school, takes anywhere between 10 days to 2 weeks to get exam scores back. The LSAT, the exam for like law school, take more like 3 weeks, and the MCAT could take 30 to 35 days, so like over a month. And that's because the MCAT is very impacted. A lot of people want to go into med school and they have very limited dates. So when they do have those dates, they take on a lot of people. So it'll take a while for them to process all your scores. So yeah, do this in a timely manner, because also if you don't like your scores the first time around and want to retake it, you're gonna need the time to schedule another test date, right? And take it all over again. So yeah, keep that in mind. And when you take these exams, they usually allow you to send scores to 3 to 5 schools. And if you go over that amount, or if you don't list a school at that time, they might charge you a fee if you want to send scores afterwards. So it's important to have like a list of schools that you're interested in, like already in your brain, like a mental picture before you take these exams. So you can just list the schools there and get those free test scores sent, right? Not having to pay a fee. So yeah, that's a little bit about testing. And now when we're talking about the personal statement, this is a written portion where you should talk about yourself as a person, right? Have the graduate committee that's looking at the applications, show them who you are as a person, because they don't know you other than whatever you're writing in the application, right? Unless you reached out to them earlier. But it's important to show them how you have overcome adversity, right? That you're someone that can get through anything, because grad school is not easy, right? It's a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility. So they want to know that you're someone determined that can like take on the workload that you might get. And some people also choose to disclose their undocumented status and show how that is a really big part in helping them be a strong person, right? I myself did disclose my status in my application, because I feel like my status has really taught me to be a very, I don't know how to say it, stubborn person. I keep reaching out to people and like trying to get opportunities regardless of whether people tell me I can't, right? I don't think I would have been that way if I had been like a citizen, right, and had everything offered to me. I wouldn't have valued what was given to me, right? So some people want to disclose their status, and that's totally fine. But if you don't feel comfortable doing so, again, I'm not pressuring you to do that. It's whatever you feel most comfortable with. Let's continue this here. I actually have a link to a article that kind of explains how you might want to disclose your status in a personal statement. Might be helpful if that's something you're considering doing. Again, it's just an article. Don't just believe everything they're saying. Do whatever you feel works best for you. But yeah, and also if at any point you feel like you had a little patch of your bachelor's that you struggled with, like a semester, you didn't get the best grades in a semester or two, this is the best spot to kind of like explain what you were going through and how you overcame that, right? How you improved again. So don't be super scared of like whether you had a semester or two where you did bad. That's totally fine. People go through stuff. Life happens. So just take this opportunity to explain that there and show how you overcame that. And then you can also explain about maybe the journey to your current career path. So explain how as you went through life, you found this interest that you have now. And in addition to that, maybe you can show that you're contributing as someone from a historically underrepresented community, right? A lot of us undocumented individuals are minorities. So that's another thing you can also mention here that's really powerful. The statement of purpose, on the other hand, focuses more on what you want to research when you go to grad school and what motivates you to do that. So you can have an introduction here again, like, oh, like this is my name, this is what I do, but it should be really short because like most of who you are was included in the personal statement, right? You want to use most of your word count here to talk about whatever experiences you've had, whatever campus clubs and organizations you were involved with, like that relate to that field of study that you want to go into, right? To show them that you took the initiative to participate in things related to that. And that shows them that you're truly interested in that field of study. So for example, if you took any research experience when you were in undergrad, include details about that project, right? And how that experience helped you decide to go to grad school or to study whatever. And maybe any work experience, even if it's not directly related to your major, it might show like that being in that work environment, you built skills that you might be able to apply to your field of study or in grad school. And additionally, you would put any career goals and how their program specifically is going to help you reach that goal. And if you have specific faculty in mind and you've looked at their projects and are really interested in working with them, here you can mention like, oh, even name drop, that's totally fine. Like I read about this specific faculty member, name, insert name, and I'm really interested in their project and this and that. And I think it aligns really well with what my interests are. And I feel like I can contribute to that or something along those lines, right? So just show them how you can be an asset to their program and how they are a good fit for you as well, how your interests align. So yeah, that's the statement of purpose, more about research interests and the academics of it. So now letters of rec, they usually ask for 2 to 3 letters, depending on the department. And they don't just want a letter that says like, oh yeah, this person took my class, they're a good student, they got a good grade, they do great in exams. Like, no, that's not enough. They want a strong, well-written letter. So pick recommenders that can speak on like either your work ethic, for example, like a supervisor, like an employer of some kind, or maybe an academic scenario. So like a professor, or maybe if you did research, your PI that was overlooking the project, right? People that know about the work you've done and can speak well on you, like from their experiences with you, not a professor that you didn't really go to office hours to, you didn't really speak to them, right? That doesn't really help. So ideally, you should let them know around like 2 months before you plan to submit the deadline, just to give them a heads up so they can start thinking about that. And when you ask them, you should provide them with like a resume so they know more about what you've done outside of whatever context they know you, right? So like if it's a professor, they might not know like your part-time job that relates to the field. They might not know that you're part of this one club that is related to the field, right? So it's really good to give them a resume. And if you've already started writing your statement of purpose and have written about what you want to study and research, even better, show them that too, because then they'll be able to speak on how they think that you have the skills for that, right? they'll be more specific in that letter, and it makes it that much stronger of a letter of rec. Okay, so yeah, prepare them with the resources so they can speak well about you, and let them know ahead of time. And another thing to know is people forget, right? They can be really busy, especially like employers and professors. They work with a ton of other people. So give them reminders. Give them, I don't know, like a monthly reminder, and then like the few weeks leading up to the deadline or whenever you're going to submit, give them weekly reminders just to make sure they're on track and have those ready. Because it can be the case that like you submit the application, you do everything of your part, but the recommenders are usually required to submit them separately, right? The school usually like emails them with instructions on how to submit their recommendation. And if they don't remember and don't submit it for you, that can completely void your application, and it wasn't your fault technically, right? So make sure you remind them, because they're human too and they're busy. Okay, that's letters of rec. Now for the resume and CV. This should be like a concise summary. They usually want like 1 page, nothing too long. And they just want to know about your educational experience and any work experience you've had. A lot of information here should connect to your statement of purpose and like what you want to study. So for example, say you have various clubs that you participated in, and they might not fit within the 1 page or like maybe 2 pages max. Just pick the ones that are most relevant to whatever program you're going to, right? For example, like I was in a DJ club in undergrad, and I was also in like a math club, like an applied math club, and I was part of that as well. But if I had to pick, obviously I'm gonna pick the one in math, right? Because that's my major, not necessarily DJ, although it's cool, but I don't think that's gonna help me with chances going in, right? So know how to pick information that is most relevant, and ties into what you stated in your statement of purpose. And yeah, it's gonna have basic stuff like your personal contact information, whatever educational degrees you have, any awards, or if you publicize something like a paper, great, add that too. And yeah, any skills or memberships you've had, just a resume. And if you need help with that, you can always reach out to the Career Center on campus. They allow you to submit like a PDF of your resume, and someone reviews it and usually gets it back to you with like feedback within 24 hours, if not 2 days. So very useful. Or if you want me to help you give a more grad school oriented perspective, you can always stop by my office hours, okay? All right. But the next part, and the part that I know a lot of people are curious about, is, okay, what is the cost like and what are funding opportunities? All right, so here are a couple average estimates of what tuition costs for grad school, and it honestly really depends on like what type of degree you're getting and what field you're in, right? So if you can see here, for a master's, it's a bit cheaper because it's usually like 2 years, 1 year, it's a lot shorter. So that's why it's so much cheaper, because of the short time frame. And it's usually anywhere between 10 to 60,000, but you can see it can get really expensive depending on your major, right? And then example, like public schools and private schools have a really big price difference as well. So that's why the range is so big. But yeah, that's an example of what master's would cost. If you're going to med school, it can be anywhere between 32,000 to 52,000 per year. The minimum of that range is kind of high, and med school is not a short process, right? It's several years. So keep that in mind. Medical school is very expensive, but that's also because they expect you to have a big return on that investment once you're a doctor and start earning a decent amount of money, right? But it is a lot to first invest in. So if you're considering medical school, you're going to have to really plan out and budget ahead of time and look into what fellowships are out there. Because actually there's a lot of funding out there for people in medicine. You just got to make the time to go out and find it, right? Okay. And then law school. That's another professional degree specific to being a lawyer, right? And it's also pretty pricey. So it can range anywhere between 45,000 to 75,000 a year. But I will say law is another field that has a lot of funding out there. There's so many scholarships and fellowships for law, especially for the undocumented community, because there's so many of us who are interested in like going into like immigration fields, right, to help their family and their situation. So there's a lot out there. You just got to know to search for it. And then if you want to do a PhD, that is around 28,000 to 40,000 per year. And again, this varies. It is a longer process. A PhD can take anywhere between 5 to 7 years. So just keep in mind, like, this cost is also over a long time, kind of like med school. So it is a bigger investment. But PhDs have a lot of funding out there. And in most cases, when you're applying to a grad program, especially at UCs, there is a funding guarantee. And yes, so I have fellowship resources and links. I will go through that in the next couple of slides. But yeah, a PhD, although it seems a bit more pricey and it is a longer time frame, usually departments will fully fund you or promise to fund you for the most part. The UCs, a couple of them have a 5-year guarantee, where you will be fully funded for 5 years guaranteed, which is why a lot of students kind of want to go for a PhD because they don't want to pay, right? But I still don't want that to be the reason why you pick a PhD, because it is a big commitment. And even though you're going to be funded for 5 years, you're expected to pump out that much more work because you're being funded, right? Publish a lot of papers, do TA-ships, do a lot of research projects. So it's a lot more constrained because they're funding you, right? So keep that in mind. There is funding out there, but the experiences are slightly different. It just depends on what you want. Okay. And then apart from tuition, there's always additional costs. I know you're probably familiar with this as you're doing your bachelor's right now, but there's always going to be the concerns about housing, food, transportation, health insurance, like any books, lab equipment, or any personal expenses. Yeah, so these expenses never go away. So keep in mind, this is something you're still going to have to think about at the grad level. And which is why I stated also that location is important, not only because there's different laws as an undocumented student in different states, but also depending where you go is the cost of living, right? Santa Cruz is kind of pricey, whereas if you had gone to another town in California, for example, like Merced, that was my undergrad, it's a lot cheaper. I paid $300 in rent there. I pay over $1,000 here. So keep that in mind. Yeah. These costs will always be there, so look into the department and ask if they will provide any like housing opportunities or like any funding for housing as well. And another thing that I can't stress enough is to submit the DREAM Act application. When I was applying, I wasn't sure whether to submit it because Cal Grants usually only last 4 years, so I had already used mine up, right? I wasn't gonna get any Cal Grants for grad school, so I don't know what the point was of submitting it, but I just turned it in just in case, and thank God I did. Because the California DREAM Act is how universities usually know whether you're undocumented or not. Because nowhere in the application do they directly ask, are you undocumented, right? Because that's something pretty private to most people, and that's not something they require of the application. So the way USS knows whether you're undocumented or any campus would is through the financial aid department. Whoever's listed as a DREAM Act applicant, they know is undocumented, and they know to reach out to you for resources that are applicable to you. So if you don't submit anything, the schools don't have any of your financial information and have no idea about your status, right? They won't know unless you speak up. So it is really important to submit that application because who knows, even if you don't have any more Cal Grants available, the campus might have scholarships and fellowships specifically for undocumented grad students or available to undocumented grad students. You wouldn't be able to get them if they're school funds because you never gave them your financial information, so they can't really pay you any of that. Additionally, some internships are stipend based. So that means they pay you through the school, right? Through financial aid, they deposit the money or whatever. And if you never submitted your application, they can't pay you. So that includes like TA positions or graduate research positions. If the school does not have your financial aid information and you're getting paid through school funds, they can't pay you. So submit that DREAM Act. And yeah, the financial aid office, again, will refer you to resources applicable to you if they have your information. Next thing is funding works a little bit differently at the grad level. Usually when you're an undergrad, you get funding from like the school, right? Like from the UC system. But once you get to the graduate level, you get funds from your specific program or department. Say you're like a math major, your specific math department has funds that are paid to you, right? It's not funding from the UC system or UC regions, none of that. So it's important to ask about what funding opportunities your specific department has for you. They might have a certain amount of graduate student research positions. They're called GSRs. These are usually funded through grants that professors in the department have applied for and received. That's just thousands of dollars that are meant for them to do specific types of research, right? Depending on the grant, they might have requirements like, oh, you need to get a student that is from this background in order to fund them, right? You can't use those funds for just anyone. So it's important to ask, like, are there any funds available for me, like in my situation? Additionally, there's TA-ships, teaching assistantships. These are usually provided just like in the graduate division throughout all departments. And some departments might have a limited number of TA positions available. Like for example, my program, computational media, is kind of small. It's not that big. It's a slightly newer department. So there's not that many TA-ships, right? Compared to maybe computer science or math. They might have a lot more slots for TAs. And at least here in Santa Cruz, the good thing is you can apply to be a TA at other departments. And that means you have more opportunities to get funding and get your tuition paid and stuff. But what if it's a campus that doesn't allow you to get a TA-ship outside of your department, right? You're stuck with whatever options are there and maybe there's not enough for you. So it's important to ask, like, do you have these opportunities for me? And another thing about TA-ships, sometimes departments prioritize PhDs over masters, right? So if you go in for a master's, just keep that in mind, PhD might get priority over you. So always explore options and see how the department prioritizes their funds. And like I mentioned, there might be other grants that the department, your specific department offers. It's always important to ask if that's available. And there's also fellowships specific to different schools. So I actually saw this recently. SFSU has a graduate equity fellowship that's specifically for minorities and undocumented people. And it's like around $5,000. And it's meant to just like provide opportunities for non-traditional graduate students, right? And maybe you never asked and you were applying to SFU, like you wouldn't have known unless you asked, right? So always look into any fellowships or grants they might have. And another example is like UCLA. They have these two other fellowships that are also more specific towards undocumented students or like minorities. So yeah, it's always important to just look around, see what your specific campus or department has to offer for you. Okay, so now the funding. I put a ton of links here. I hope it's useful. I will try to drop these all in the chat, but I will show these to you next week, but just so you can start looking at them starting now. I have these here. So this first one here is the BYU Undocumented Student Scholarships. I don't remember the exact name of that university. Actually, let me open that because I'm curious now. I don't remember what that stood for. It's some university. I don't know what this name stands for. Whatever the case is, they have this list of scholarships specific for undocumented students. Kind of wish Santa Cruz would start this too. This would be great. But yeah, they have it listed by month and they've been specifically curated for undocumented students. So yeah, just you can look through here and see if any of them apply to you. I might actually apply to this. That looks very interesting. Actually, the deadline passed next year. But yeah, they have stuff here for the whole year and they update it yearly. So say last year, there you go, Brigham Young. Yeah, that university. But yeah, it's really great that they have this specifically curated list for undocumented students. So I'll put this in the chat. So that's the BYU one. Fiscal Tiger also has a list of a couple of scholarships for undocumented students. So I'll put that in the chat. Then Immigrants Rising is actually one of the best sources of scholarships for undocumented students. I actually want to open this and we'll go through it together. For the 2021, they had a PDF with scholarships listed by month. But starting this year, they actually released this like customized list that is just updated often. And you have to filter out if you want stuff specific to graduate school, right? Because this includes everything, including scholarships for high school students all the way up to grad school, right? So say you want to look into grad school stuff, you would click the filter, add condition. I want to filter my education status. So I want to make sure that it is for graduate or professional studies because I'm going into grad school, right? And as you can see here, it kind of filters that out for you. And this is where I saw the SFSU Graduate Equity Fellowship. And there's a lot of them here, just depending on what major or field you're going into. There's some for like gaming scholarships. There's also stuff for like law. There's a lot of law school stuff. So you can also filter this based on whatever major you're going in. You can add that as well and filter it even more. So feel free to mess around with this. This one is a really good resource. And I love that they're updating it often. All right. So in addition to that, there's also MalDef. It is also a really helpful resource, not just for scholarships, but also in general for like information. So this is a page to their scholarship resource list. It wasn't updated this year, but you might still be able to find stuff for 2022 on there. But in general, MalDef has a lot of like legal information that might be relevant to you. They're a Latino legal civil rights organization. So if you're interested in knowing all of the laws, Latin American legislation, feel free to visit the site for that as well. And let's see, there's also Pre-Health Dreamers. This is their list of scholarship resources, and this is meant more towards people who want to go into medicine or like a health field. So another resource for that. And then just to mention a couple of fellowships. I don't know when the deadline to this was, it might have already passed, but there's the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans. And that is just a general scholarship, not specific to any campus. This actually, I don't think this is relevant anymore. This is a 2021 fellowship list. I will still add it in case you want to see if any of those fellowships are also being offered this year, but that should also be included in this Immigrants Rising list that I showed you. I think they put both scholarships and fellowships on that same list. And finally, another fellowship that might be out there is the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowship. This is for students who want to go into a PhD. So this might be something else to look into. A lot of links, I know, I'm so sorry, just look at whatever interests you. I'll send you all of this information hopefully next week. Okay, and in terms of internships, Pre-Health Dreamers also has a list of any internships within like the health field that might be available to you. And Best Colleges also has internships and fellowships for undocumented students. So yeah, a lot of links, a lot of stuff out there. And this is not all that's out there, this is all that I found, so feel free to search for more things as well. This is all funding that's external to your school. So just keep in mind there's stuff outside of the campus that you can always look into. Just search online and everywhere. But in addition to that, if you just want to keep up with updates of like information, or maybe like, I know Immigrants Rising has like a pre-law program where you can apply and they will like kind of prep and train you if you want to go into law school and stuff like that. I just recommend stay connected to these 4 different websites. They're really great resources, not just for financial aid, but just for information in general. So these are very helpful. All right, so talked about whatever department funding is there, external fellowships, scholarships, etc. Information, no websites, but there's also the option to take loans. I will say that is one of the last options I would recommend. Do this as a last resort. But you can definitely get a loan as an undocumented individual. If you have an ETHIN and a taxpayer identification number, you should be eligible for institutional or private loans. Okay, so you should be able to get a loan through the school or a private loan. They're just depending where you go. Also, if you have DACA, you would be eligible for a Sallie Mae or a Discover loan, as long as you have a US citizen as a cosigner. And finally, we have the UC Dream loans. So if you're planning on applying to a UC as well for grad school, you can use the UC Dream loan for that too. You can apply, but it's always that $4,000 limit per school year. And they also just split it into the 3 quarters and give you like what, 1,000 something each quarter. They don't give you the 4,000 at once. So not that much, but it can help. If you already took out some of that money, there's a 20,000 limit, but if you already took out some of that money as a loan in your undergrad, you don't get a 20,000 extra over that, right? It is a $20,000 limit, counting whatever you borrowed in undergrad. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But there are options out there to get loans. It's just not my preferred or recommended option. Okay. So yeah, there's various ways out there to look for funding. And again, like I said, if you're taking a gap year, take that time to like apply to all these things, get funding. If you get a job and are working in the meantime, save up money. I actually saved up money before coming here while I was an undergrad, right? So keep that in mind. Have that pool of money saved up for grad school if possible. Okay, so now that we know about all these different resources on how to get money, right? It'd be great to create a budget just to keep track, right? If you're applying to all these scholarships, fellowships, whatever, getting money, keep track of that money, put it in a fund, have a budget, and know how to administrate it properly. Because if you just spend it, it's gonna you're gonna run out of money soon. So in order to create a budget, there are a couple resources I think might be useful if you don't know where to start. There are various Excel sheets that I think are useful. So for example, there's this one here, which is just a general college student budget. You can adapt it to whatever your purposes are. So for example, when you're thinking of your first year of grad school, put into here well, how much am I gonna spend in tuition? And how much do I plan to earn while I'm in grad school? If I have an internship that pays me, a TA-ship, if I have a job, put that all here, and just so you have a mental picture and see if it is financially wise for you to go into grad school at that moment, or if you have the income venues that will actually help you pay that off, right? So this is just a general template that you can use, very helpful. Just make a copy, add it to your drive. And then there's also another budget grid by the Muse. It's very similar. It's just maybe you might prefer this format better. You can put in more than just school. This is a more general one. So if you want to consider in your budget everything, including insurance, just any salary you're getting from a job, any utilities, it's very detailed. So if you want to have an overall budget, that's also great too. So there's this resource as well if you'd like to use it. And then there's also the EOP budget grid. I'm not sure if you've done that before with any of our USS mentors. They sometimes do budget grids with students, or maybe one of our EOP counselors, they do budget grids with students as well. But if you ever want to do a budget grid with my help, you can visit my office hours and I will be more than glad to help you complete that budget grid, just to get that mental picture of how you would finance your grad school. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you today. Again, like I just said, my drop-in hours, I'm available 4 days a week, in the mornings and also in the evenings, whatever works best for you. If you need an appointment time outside of those hours, feel free to email me and I'll be more than happy to accommodate. I will put a link to the USS calendar in the chat. It's just a Google Calendar on our website that has the different times we have mentoring hours. Mine are listed there as like the graduate school drop-ins. So feel free to just stop by. It has my Zoom link and everything in the description. And another resource that's really helpful is GIP, the Graduate Information Program. They also work with us under EOP. And they take appointments to help out students with any question in the graduate application process. Keep in mind, they might not have all the details in terms of like your undocumented status, but for anything in general of the application, they're very helpful. So I will put their sign up Google form in the chat in case you want to set up an appointment with them as well. That concludes today's presentation, and 5 minutes to spare. Yes, the timing was great. So does anyone have any questions? Today is the last day. I know we've covered a lot in the last 3 days, so that's a lot of information to process.
I had a question. What would be like your suggestion for people who are like waiting or trying to like take like a gap year for grad school?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I've covered is pretty much general stuff that you can apply to a gap year. You would just do it over the course of whatever gap you're taking, right? But yeah, like one of the main things I would stress if you're wanting to take a gap year is because you're not going to be in school, right? You're taking that gap year, whether you're working or doing whatever the case is, it's very easy to just get distracted with life and just not commit to coming back to school, right? So I really urge you to make a plan and actually stick to it. Set goals for yourself, because if you don't have the pressures of being a student to constantly remind you, you kind of forget about it, right? And I don't want that to be the case. So like did I include it in the first part? I think I might have included it in the first part, but I suggest you guys make an IDP, which is an individual development plan. There are actually websites out there for you to use if you wanted to use that resource. But yeah, an IDP helps you go through a couple steps. So first, it has you do a self-assessment, like decide what my goals are, what my skills are, what I want to do, right? Once you kind of have that idea, it goes through and has you do career exploration and see what's out there and see what careers align with your interests. And then you can go in and look at like grad school and see what goals you have for grad school, what departments fit what you want to do, stuff like that. And then the next step is setting goals for yourself, right? Now that you know where you want to go, what you want to do, how are you going to accomplish that? And a lot of what we covered in the 3 parts of this is like how to get to grad school, right? But first you need to do that initial step of like figuring out what you want to do for sure, right? Because it's a big commitment in grad school. So I want you to know for sure what you want before you jump into it. So making this plan will hopefully keep you accountable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thank you. That helped a lot. Thank you so much.